Self-assessment task 5.1. Read the feature below and then answer the questions that follow. Labor productivity in Pakistan. Vulnerable unemployment is a relative new term. It is defined as the number of family workers and own account workers as a percentage of the total employed. There are strong linkages between these, working poverty, and labor productivity. Productivity increases can be obtained through investment, trade, technological progress, or changes in working practices. The significance is that such increases can lead to increases in spending on social protection and poverty reduction. Vulnerable employment may also be reduced. Although there is no guarantee, without productivity growth, and hence induced economic growth, the improvements in the quality of life are highly unlikely. Pakistan has millions of people living below the poverty line, although the trend is falling. Productivity growth is vital if the percentages continue to fall, especially as the total population is projected to increase. There is no clear pattern in labor productivity growth rates since 1990. Negative rates were recorded in the late 1990s, although more recently the positive growth rates have been a corresponding reduction in poverty. Economic and social reforms have paved the way for higher economic growth rates. A particular challenge, though, is to improve the position of women in the labor market. Participation rates are low, and there is a need to give women better access not only to jobs but to quality jobs. If achieved, this would help reduce vulnerable employment and poverty. Figure 5.1. Labor productivity growth based on constant U.S. dollars 1990 to PPP percent. This is the percentage. This is the labor productivity. Give some likely reasons for the volatile annual changes in labor production shown in 5.0. Specifically, why it changes so radically between these time periods. As well as more women entered in labor force, analyze other policies that might be used by Pakistan government to increase labor productivity. Self-assessment task 5.2. For your own country, see what information you can obtain on the number of people in employment, the number of people who are unemployed. Number 2. Can you identify any trends in these important variables over the past 10 years? 3. Comment on the macroeconomic significance of the size of the working population and the dependency ratio. Self-assessment task 5.3. Read the feature below and then answer the questions that follow. So you think London is expensive? It isn't anymore. It might be surprising for Londoners to hear that the capital city has fallen down a league table of the world's most expensive cities, sliding from 2nd to 22nd. The precipitous slide in the pound from the heady heights of $2.11 in November 2007 to $1.41 in January 2009 has triggered a sudden drop in the cost of living in London, or according to research by UBS, the investment bank. Oslo is now the world's most expensive city, followed by Zurich, Copenhagen, Geneva, Tokyo, and New York. Other big fallers include Moscow, Mexico City, and Seoul, where the cost of living was also hit by currency devaluations and, in the case of Russia capital, falling oil prices. The cheapest cities are Kuala Lumpur, Manila, Delhi, and Mumbai, according to UBS calculations, which are based on a basket of 144 goods and services. Within these categories, London residents suffer because their rail travel is the most expensive. A second-class one-way ticket for a 125-mile rail journey costs £58.69. A double the fare for a comparable distance in some Western European cities. Also tops the league because of its strong currency and its relative strength during the global economic crisis. Residents also pay some of the highest taxes and society security contributions in the world. The gap in the cost of living between Eastern and Western Europe has not narrowed quickly, despite the huge change in the former communist bloc. The baskets are roughly 35% cheaper in the cities of Eastern Europe, Union states, rather than the Western counterparts, down from 38% in 2006. The UBS expects to catch up in prices to take more than a decade. And as the pound falls, Eastern European workers in the UK will have to work harder to send the same amount home. Polish people with a job in London have to put an extra hour and a half each month compared to 2006 to send home £200. Someone earning the average wage in New York can afford an iPod Nano after 9 hours of work, while employers in Mumbai need to put in 29-hour days or about a month to purchase the same music player. Tokyo workers have to spend only 12 minutes at their desk before they can buy a Big Mac for lunch, while the counterparts in Nairobi, the Kenyan capital, have to work for more than 2.5 hours. However, going out for a meal is an expensive business in the average resident of Tokyo, where a three-course dinner with wine comes to an average of £53 compared to £33 in London. Prices for postage stamps and cleaning services show greatest variation, with stamps almost 90% more expensive in some cities than others. Employees in Asian and Middle Eastern cities are spending much longer at work, averaging 2,119 hours and 2,603 hours per year, respectively. The treadmill at its most demanding in Cairo, where the average employee clocks up to 2,373 hours per year, followed by Seoul with 2,312. In contrast, French workers are at their jobs for much shorter times. Staff in Lyon and Paris put in respectively 1,582 and 1,594 hours per year. Source: The Times, August 2000, 2009. August 20th, 2009. Number 1. Account for the variation in the cost of living between cities. Number 2. Discuss the use and limitations of information contained in this article. Self-assessment, Task 5.4. With reference to your own country, briefly describe how you might construct an appropriate price level index. If such an index exists, how does it compare with your own ideas on how it might be constructed? Self-assessment Task 5.5. Read the feature below and then answer the questions that follow. In December 2000, Mexico was experiencing a shortage of skilled labor. This had begun to create bottlenecks and increase growth and push up wage rates. For example, in Chihuahua, a northern border state, a center for assembly for export plants, rural wages had risen by 32% over the year. The government was seeking to raise productivity in the short run by introducing more flexible labor laws, and in the long run by improving education and training. Using the Keynesian long-run aggregate supply curve, explain at what position on the curve the Mexican economy was seemingly operating in December 2000. Illustrate and explain the effect of a rise in wage rates on the short-run aggregate supply curve, b. improved education and training on the long-run aggregate supply curve. Self-assessment Task 5.6. Identify the effects of the following on aggregate demand, aggregate supply, output, and the price level. A reduction in the rate of interest, an increase in government spending on healthcare, advances in information technology, and increases in the quality of training. E. A cut in income tax. F. An increase in wealth. Specimen exam question. 1. A. Explain the possible reason for a change in the size of a country's labor force. B. Discuss the likely effects of the macroeconomy of a large increase inward migration into a country. Discuss the likely effects on the macroeconomy of a large increase in inward migration into a country.